Welcome! Today you'll learn exactly how the IB individual oral works and how to execute it with calm, confident precision. We'll move through the full sequence in plain language, and then you'll hear a natural teacher-student exchange that applies the very same sequence to an extract from The Wave by Todd Strasser. By the end, you'll know how to start, how to keep your thinking tight and text-bound, and how to land with a meaningful connection to a bigger course theme. Think of your performance in 3 movements. You begin with a focused analysis of one extract you've chosen. In your 20 minutes of supervised preparation, you may create brief bullet point notes, but those notes are only scaffolding. Your actual reflection is spoken in complete sentences. Start by anchoring yourself. Who is present, where this moment sits in the work, and what is happening right now. Then read again to see how the writing makes meaning. Listen for tone, notice diction, especially loaded, evaluative, or technical wording. Observe point of view and how close the narration sits to a character's mind, and look for visible patterns like contrasts, lists, or repeated frames such as if, he would, if, he might. From this second pass, craft a one-breath focus sentence you can say out loud. The passage presents X as Y, and it achieves this through A, B, and C. That sentence is your compass. Everything you say should develop, exemplify, or deepen it. Choose a small number of ideas that truly serve that compass. For each idea, gather tiny phrases as micro-evidence, 2 to 5 words, not whole lines. The smartest evidence already carries a technique inside it, a trio of adjectives, a quoted word that signals irony, a repeated structural frame, or a vivid image. When you speak, move in a clear chain. The idea you see, the exact phrase that proves it, the effect that phrase creates for a reader, and the likely purpose for that moment in the story. Keep quotations short and woven into your own sentences so your voice stays fluent. Conclude with a one-line zoom-out that says why this moment matters within the whole work or within a cultural perspective you've studied. If you add a personal note, keep it analytical. Explain why a choice is effective, unsettling, or revealing. After your reflection, the conversation stays on the same extract. Treat questions as invitations to clarify, extend, or refine what you've already argued. Listen fully, take a breath, and add something fresh you held in reserve, perhaps a tonal shift, a repeated structure, or a single revealing word. So you're not repeating yourself. When a question feels broad, narrow it to a precise phrase. When a question feels narrow, widen it toward a larger idea, and then return to the exact language that anchors you. Keep your language accurate and varied, using clean connective tissue, initially, by contrast, as a result, ultimately, so your answers remain coherent. Finally, you connect your extract to a wider course theme in a way that feels earned. Use the very language you analyze to make that bridge. Avoid generalities. Show how the micro choices you noticed point naturally to a macro issue in the work, and say in 1 or 2 sentences why that connection matters. One sharp, well-supported link is far more persuasive than a handful of vague ones. Now let's model the sequence. You'll hear a teacher invite a reflection in sentences, followed by follow-up questions on the same extract, and then a natural link to a broader theme the teacher selects.
When you're ready, share your reflection on the extract.
This passage introduces a divided faculty response to Ben Ross and then shifts to a small classroom moment that humanizes him. The writing presents Ross as an inventive, student-centered teacher who unsettles tradition, and it achieves this through contrast in evaluative language, patterned conditional structures that suggest habit rather than stunt, and a gently comic tone that rounds him out. On one side, colleagues are impressed with his energy and dedication and creativity, and they credit him with bringing a new outlook that keeps history practical and relevant. On the other, some reduce him to the labels young, naive, and overzealous, which judge him rather than his students' learning. The contrast matters because the praise is tied to outcomes and practice, while the criticism polices identity and decorum. The narration immediately supports the admiration with concrete classroom design. There is a clear rhythm in the conditional sentences. If they were studying the political system, he would divide the class into political parties. If they studied a famous trial, he might assign one student to be the defendant, others to be the prosecution and defense attorneys, and still others to sit as the jury. The echo of if he would, if he might sounds like a method he uses routinely rather than a single flashy activity. It also immerses students inside civic structures, parties, defendants, attorneys, juries, so knowledge becomes something enacted rather than merely recited. Even the modal nuance matters. Would implies a familiar procedure. Might signals adaptive judgment. Together, they characterize Ross as both principled and responsive. Small textual cues expose the social pressure around him. The word right appears in quotation marks when colleagues prescribe the right way, reading, weekly quizzes, lectures. So the line quietly invites us to question who decides what right means. The complaint that he never wore a suit and tie shifts the debate from pedagogy to appearance, equating professionalism with conformity. The aside that one or two teachers might be just plain jealous hints that part of the resistance is personal rivalry rather than principled disagreement. These details suggest that the institution privileges sameness and surface codes as proofs of quality. The tone then tilts toward gentle humor when the scene moves to the projector. Ross scratched his head at a tangle of celluloid, rolls the film back, wonders why training did not include film threading, and hopes a student audiovisual whiz can help. The diction is kind, not cruel, so the moment does not dismantle his credibility, it humanizes him. With his senior class due and a film he has anticipated for weeks, the passage adds urgency and a touch of situational irony. A teacher capable of orchestrating complex simulations is briefly defeated by a machine. Stepping back, the extract previews a central tension the novel will test, innovation rubbing against routine, and it asks us to notice how quickly the pursuit of order and appearances can overshadow the deeper purpose of learning.
You argue that the negative judgments target identity rather than learning. What in the wording takes you from a disagreement about methods to a critique of institutional identity?
The language clusters around the person and the surface. Young, naive, and overzealous are personal evaluations. The suit and tie complaint polices appearance. The quoted right casts a standard as a slogan. None of these items mention student understanding or engagement. By contrast, the praise is paired with practical relevant and the concrete simulations. That imbalance suggests gatekeeping, not pedagogy.
You notice the conditional rhythm. What does the movement from he would divide to he might assign add to your understanding of Ross?
It adds flexibility to consistency. Would reads as a stable routine for familiar content, while might shows he adjusts the configuration to the needs of a particular topic. The pairing pushes back against the caricature of a reckless innovator. He is systematic and adaptive at once.
The quotation marks around right are subtle. What do they accomplish here?
They turn an asserted norm into a contested claim. By signaling distance from the term, the narration invites us to question whether right is genuinely best for learning or simply most traditional. That positioning matters because it legitimizes Ross's simulations as serious alternatives rather than novelties.
The projector moment could be read as undermining him. Why doesn't it have that effect?
Because of placement and tone. The passage first establishes his thoughtful pedagogy, only then does it offer a comic, harmless limitation. The verbs are low stakes and the image, tangle of celluloid, is more affectionate than damning. The effect is balance. He remains credible and we understand him as a whole person.
What you're tracing links naturally to social organization. The colleague's attachment to a right method, and even to outward symbols like a suit and tie, shows how institutions maintain order through shared routines and appearances. Meanwhile, the classroom simulations, political parties, a courtroom with defendant, prosecution, defense, and jury, mirror formal structures that organize society. The very features that make organizations efficient. Predictable roles, codified procedures, recognizable uniforms also make them resistant to change. This extract encodes that double edge, the ironic right, the dress code policing, the hint of rivalry and jealous, and the procedural if he would, if he might. Seen through that lens, the scene foreshadows how a community can be drawn to uniformity and discipline because they feel safe and orderly, even when that comfort begins to narrow thought. Pressure, the novel will escalate.
That is the shape you're aiming for. Prepare with a one-breath focus sentence. Keep your evidence tiny and purposeful. Speak in full sentences that flow from idea to effect to purpose. Answer follow-ups by adding fresh text-anchored detail, and let the language you analyzed carry you naturally into a larger theme. If you hold that compass steady, your individual oral will sound clear, grounded, and compelling.